The year of our Lord 1349. The Black Death, a pestilence of unimaginable horror, had swept across Europe like a scythe through wheat. From the sun-drenched shores of Italy to the misty forests of Germania, the land was choked with corpses, and the air thick with the stench of death. Fear reigned supreme, piety had turned to desperation, and hope lay buried beneath mountains of the dead. In the relative isolation of the Benedictine Abbey of St. Albans, nestled deep within the English countryside, Brother Thomas of Hereford sought refuge from the world's turmoil. His days were spent in the scriptorium, a sanctuary of silence and scholarship, where he painstakingly preserved the wisdom of ages past. He found solace in the rhythm of the quill, the scent of ink, and the weight of history in his hands. His tranquil existence was shattered by the arrival of a papal decree, carried by a breathless messenger who collapsed at the monastery gates, raving of plague and divine retribution. The message, sealed with the unmistakable emblem of the Holy See, commanded Brother Thomas to travel to Rome without delay. A chill ran down Thomas's spine as he read the summons. He was a scholar, not a soldier of Christ. Rome, the heart of the Church, was also the epicenter of the plague. Why had he, a humble scribe, been chosen for this perilous journey? The answer, he suspected, lay hidden within the Vatican's walls, shrouded in secrets and whispered conspiracies. The road to Rome was a gauntlet of death and despair. Villages lay deserted, their inhabitants claimed by the pestilence. The few travelers Thomas encountered were gaunt, hollow-eyed figures, driven by desperation and haunted by fear. Each step was a gamble, each breath a potential death sentence. He pressed onward, guided by his faith and the unwavering belief that God had a purpose for him, however obscure it might be. He prayed for deliverance, not only for himself but for all those who suffered under the shadow of the Black Death. Yet with each passing day, his heart grew heavier and his spirit more weary. One night, huddled around a meager fire with a band of fellow pilgrims, Thomas overheard whispers of heresy and divine wrath. Some claimed the plague was God's punishment for the Church's sins, others that the Antichrist had been unleashed upon the world. Such talk, though born of fear, hinted at a deeper unease that gnawed at the foundations of Christendom. Thomas listened, his mind troubled. He knew that the Church was not without its flaws, its wealth and power often breeding corruption and hypocrisy, but he had always believed in its divine mission, its role as the shepherd of souls. Could it be that the plague was indeed a sign of God's displeasure, or was it merely the result of natural causes, exacerbated by ignorance and superstition? After weeks of arduous travel, Rome finally appeared on the horizon, a city of towering spires and ancient ruins, its grandeur both inspiring and intimidating. But even from afar, Thomas could sense the pall of death that hung over the city, a grim reminder of the task that awaited him. As he passed through the gates of the Vatican, Thomas felt a profound sense of unease. The air was thick with secrets. The very stones seemed to whisper of forgotten sins. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he had entered a world of intrigue and danger, a world where faith and reason were often pitted against each other in a desperate struggle for survival. He was led through a labyrinthine network of corridors, past imposing portraits of past popes, each face a mask of authority and power. The silence was deafening, broken only by the echo of his own footsteps. He felt as though he were being watched, scrutinized by unseen eyes, judged by the weight of centuries. Finally, he was ushered before Bishop Guillaume de Paris, a man of imposing stature and piercing gaze. Thomas knew little of the bishop, save for his reputation as a staunch defender of the Church. But as he knelt before him, he sensed a deep unease in the bishop's eyes, a hint of doubt that mirrored his own. He was about to learn the true reason for his summons, the secret that lay hidden within the Vatican's archives, a secret that could shatter the foundations of Christendom. Rome, 1349. The stench of sickness clung to the city even within the Vatican walls. Brother Thomas, newly arrived, sought solace in prayer, steeling himself for the task ahead. Two guards, faces grim, led Thomas through a labyrinth of corridors. The air grew colder, the silence heavier with each step towards the bishop's chambers. Bishop Guillaume's study was a stark contrast to the city's squalor. Tapestries adorned the walls, and the air was thick with incense. Yet the bishop's face was etched with worry. "Brother Thomas," Guillaume began, his voice low and urgent, "we face a crisis unlike any other. Rumors of heresy spread like wildfire, fueled by the despair of these dark times." Thomas listened, his heart pounding. Heresy was a dangerous accusation, one that could bring swift and brutal consequences. A section of the secret archives, long sealed, has been uncovered. Within lies a chronicle, a document of immense age and potential danger. Guillaume, handing Thomas a letter, added, "I've also become aware of certain outside interest in the archives. This correspondence, though seemingly innocuous, hints at a desire to understand and perhaps even manipulate history. I task you, Brother Thomas, with deciphering this chronicle. Uncover its secrets, but tread carefully. The fate of the church may hang in the balance." Thomas bowed his head. The weight of the bishop's words settled upon him. This was more than a simple task of translation. It was a trial of faith. Guillaume turned to the window, his gaze fixed on the city ravaged by plague. The church, he knew, was facing a storm from without and within. As Thomas approached the hidden door, he felt a sense of foreboding. The secrets that lay within, he suspected, would challenge everything he believed. The air hung thick with the dust of centuries as Brother Thomas faced the entrance to the Vatican secret archives. It was a place whispered about in hushed tones, a repository of secrets both sacred and profane. The heavy oak doors seemed to exhale the weight of forgotten ages. Inside, the archive stretched into a labyrinth of knowledge. Row upon row of parchment and vellum manuscripts stood sentinel, their secrets guarded by time and obscurity. The air was cool and dry, a stark contrast to the feverish humidity of plague-ridden Rome. A sense of foreboding settled upon Thomas as he navigated the endless rows. He felt like a swimmer in a sea of silent words, each capable of drowning him in its own truth or deception. He found Sister Agnes already at work, a beacon of tranquility amidst the potential chaos of the archives. Her presence was a comfort, a sign that he was not alone in this undertaking. "Brother Thomas," Sister Agnes greeted him, her voice a gentle whisper. "I have been familiarizing myself with the layout of this section. It seems unusual." She led him to a seemingly blank section of the wall. "There is a chamber hidden behind this facade. It does not appear on any of the existing maps of the archives." Thomas ran his hand along the cold stone, feeling for a seam, a break in the pattern. He found it, a nearly imperceptible line that suggested a hidden doorway. With a grunt, he and Sister Agnes pushed against the wall. It yielded with a low rumble, revealing a narrow passage shrouded in darkness. They cautiously entered the hidden chamber. It was small and circular, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. In the center stood a single pedestal. Upon the pedestal rested a single chronicle, bound in dark leather and secured with multiple locks and seals. It radiated an aura of immense age and importance. Thomas examined the seals. They were ancient, bearing the marks of popes long dead, but something was amiss. Some of the seals appeared to have been broken and replaced, though with considerable skill. "This chronicle has been guarded with extreme prejudice, Brother Thomas," Sister Agnes said, her voice laced with worry. "And someone has already attempted to tamper with it. What secrets does it hold that are so dangerous?" The vellum pages felt brittle beneath Thomas's fingertips. The ink faded yet legible. The air in the archive was thick with the scent of aged parchment and dust, a fitting atmosphere for unraveling secrets buried for centuries. Agnes's knowledge of early Christian texts was invaluable. She possessed a keen eye for detail, quickly spotting inconsistencies and subtle nuances in the language. "And Peter said unto them, Let there be no masters amongst us, for we are all brothers and sisters in Christ." Thomas read aloud, his voice barely a whisper. The words were a direct contradiction to the Church's established hierarchy. Agnes reached out, tracing the words with her finger. "The language, it's authentic, early Christian Latin but radical, almost Gnostic in its emphasis on communal living and shared authority." Further passages spoke of Peter's insistence on poverty, rejecting the accumulation of wealth and land. Thomas felt a knot forming in his stomach. This chronicle wasn't just heresy, it was a dismantling of everything he believed in. "Here," Agnes said, tapping a line with her finger. "This passage describes deliberate alterations made to the Gospels. Words added, phrases changed, to justify the centralization of power within the Church." Back in Paris, Bishop Guillaume received unsettling reports from Rome. Whispers of the chronicle's contents had reached his ears, carried by nervous Vatican officials. He feared the implications, not just for the Church, but for the stability of the entire world. The chronicle went on to detail the machinations within the early church councils. The careful selection of doctrines, the suppression of dissenting voices, the gradual construction of a system designed to concentrate power in the hands of a select few. Agnes, her faith tested to its limits, wrestled with the knowledge. Could the Church, the institution she had dedicated her life to, be built upon such a foundation of deceit? The thought was almost unbearable. Thomas stood, his heart heavy. The chronicle was more than just a historical document. It was a weapon that could shatter the Church or perhaps finally set it free. Guillaume reread the Pope's letter, a veiled order to suppress the chronicle at all costs. He felt a growing unease. Was he truly serving God, or merely protecting an institution built on lies? The truth was out, or at least a glimpse of it. Thomas and Agnes knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger, but they were bound by a shared desire to uncover the full story, no matter the cost. The implications of the chronicle weighed heavily on Thomas. Each word, each carefully drawn illustration, painted a picture of the early church starkly different from the one he knew. The egalitarianism preached by Peter, the emphasis on community, it all felt revolutionary. Agnes sighed, adjusting her wimple. If this is true, Brother Thomas, it would unravel centuries of doctrine. The very structure of the church, it would crumble. Her voice was laced with worry, a stark contrast to her usual calm demeanor. But can we ignore the truth, sister? Can we condemn those who sought to preserve this knowledge, simply because it challenges our comfortable assumptions? Thomas asked, his voice barely a whisper. These are questions for a lifetime, brother, and we must tread carefully. There are powerful forces at play, forces that would silence us without a second thought. A heavy footstep echoed through the archive as Bishop Guillaume de Paris arrived. His presence filled the small space, his opulent robes a stark contrast to the monk's simple habits. Thomas and Agnes exchanged worried glances. How much should they reveal? Could they trust the bishop with the truth they had uncovered? "We have found evidence, Your Grace, suggesting a different interpretation of the early church's structure, one that emphasizes community and shared responsibility over rigid hierarchy." Guillaume listened, his face an impassive mask. "Heresy has taken many forms throughout the ages. Are you certain of the veracity of this chronicle?" "We are still investigating, Your Grace, but the evidence is compelling. It speaks of a deliberate suppression of these teachings." Word of their investigation had begun to spread through the Vatican like a disease. Whispers followed Thomas and Agnes. Glances lingered a moment too long. Some were curious, others openly hostile. Guillaume found himself wrestling with the implications of their findings. Doubt gnawed at him, a feeling he had long suppressed in the name of faith and duty. A letter, recently arrived from Florence, sat on Guillaume's desk. The signature was that of Niccolò Machiavelli. It spoke of the importance of controlling narratives and the fragility of power. The bishop now must decide what narrative he wants to be true. The conspiracy began to unravel with the discovery of a seemingly innocuous letter, tucked within the chronicle's pages. It was a correspondence between Pope Sylvester I's successors and influential cardinals. Agnes's knowledge of papal history proved invaluable. She recognized the names mentioned in the letter as key figures in the early church, men known for their ambition and ruthlessness. Guillaume remained a silent observer, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. The implications of their findings were clearly weighing heavily on him. The letter explicitly mentioned Peter's heresy and the need to correct the historical record to ensure the Church's continued dominance. Further investigation revealed a series of papal decrees, each meticulously crafted to erase any trace of the original teachings. Books were burned, texts were altered, and dissenters were silenced. Agnes, with her scholarly mind, identified subtle alterations in subsequent copies of early Christian writings. Entire passages had been rewritten to support the Church's evolving doctrines. Guillaume could no longer deny the truth. The evidence was irrefutable. The Church he had dedicated his life to was built upon a foundation of lies and deception. A chilling realization dawned upon Thomas and Agnes. Someone within the Vatican was actively working to suppress the Chronicle and protect the secrets it contained. They were no longer merely uncovering history. They were in danger. A previously unnoticed correspondence was discovered. The writer, a young Florentine named Niccolò Machiavelli, advising on the manipulation of historical interpretation for political gain. Machiavelli's letter outlined strategies to ensure the illusion of continuity, arguing that the ends justify the means when preserving power, regardless of the truth. Guillaume, his voice trembling, confronted them. How deep does this conspiracy run? Who else knows? His authority as bishop began to erode, replaced by a palpable fear. Thomas and Agnes exchanged a look of grim understanding. They were caught in a web of deceit that reached the highest echelons of the Church. Their lives and the fate of the Church itself hung in the balance. The late hour offered a false sense of security. Thomas, driven by an insatiable need to understand the Chronicle's secrets, continued his vigil, oblivious to the approaching danger. Agnes, weary from their relentless investigation, had succumbed to sleep, her presence a silent promise of protection in the dimly lit archive. A disturbance in the shadows. A figure, cloaked in secrecy, moved with purpose towards the chronicle, their intent as dark as the unlit corners of the archive. A floorboard creaked. Thomas snapped awake, his instincts screaming danger. He saw the cloaked figure reaching for the chronicle, their hand outstretched. Agnes, roused by Thomas's sudden movement, sprang to her feet, her rosary beads clutched tightly in her hand, a silent warrior ready to defend the truth. A brief struggle ensued, the air filled with desperate gasps and muffled curses. The intruder's hood fell back, revealing the face of a Vatican guard, his eyes betraying a conflict between duty and fear. News of the attempted theft reached Bishop Guillaume. He stood in his study, the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him, his faith shaken by the events unfolding. Thomas, his voice tight with urgency, recounted the night's events to Guillaume, emphasizing the danger they faced and the growing conspiracy within the Vatican walls. Agnes observed Guillaume, searching for any sign of deceit or betrayal, her years of experience in discerning truth from falsehood guiding her instincts. Guillaume paced his study, his mind a battlefield of conflicting loyalties. The church, his life's devotion, was teetering on the precipice of chaos. Could he truly trust those around him? Could he even trust himself? Knowing they could no longer trust the safety of the Vatican, Thomas and Agnes prepared to leave, their faces etched with determination. The chronicle, the truth, had to be protected, even if it meant venturing into the plague-ridden streets of Rome. Under the cloak of darkness, Thomas and Agnes slipped out of a hidden entrance, leaving behind the gilded cage of the Vatican. Their destination, unknown. Their mission, to safeguard the truth no matter the cost. Bishop Guillaume paced his study, the coded message burning in his hand. It confirmed his worst fears. A trusted advisor was deeply enmeshed in the plot to bury the chronicle. The implications were staggering. How could he trust anyone? Guillaume summoned Father Benedict, a man he had trusted for decades. The weight of the accusation hung heavy in the air as he presented the evidence. Benedict vehemently denied any involvement, his face a mask of wounded innocence. Father Benedict's protestations echoed through the corridor. He swore on his life, on the Holy See, that he knew nothing of the conspiracy. But Guillaume saw a flicker of something else in his eyes, fear, perhaps, or guilt. Left alone, Guillaume retreated to the chapel. The familiar scent of incense usually brought comfort, but tonight it offered no solace. He wrestled with his conscience. Was he condemning an innocent man, or was he blinded by years of misplaced trust? The weight of the church rested on his shoulders, and the truth of the chronicle threatened to shatter it all. Was it his duty to protect the institution, even if it meant suppressing the truth? Or did his faith demand he expose the lies, no matter the cost? Meanwhile, Thomas and Agnes continued their work, unaware of Guillaume's inner turmoil. The chronicle spoke of a radically different church, one built on love and community rather than power and dogma. The implications were earth-shattering. Agnes, with her deep understanding of early Christian history, saw the potential for renewal within the chronicle's message, but she also understood the danger it posed to the established order. The path forward was fraught with peril. Guillaume, his decision made, summoned Thomas and Agnes to his study. He knew he had to share what he had learned, to enlist their help in navigating the treacherous path ahead. The fate of the church, and perhaps the world, hung in the balance. Guillaume revealed his suspicions about Father Benedict and the intercepted message. Thomas listened intently, his mind racing to connect the dots. The conspiracy was larger and more dangerous than they had imagined. Agnes, ever the pragmatist, saw the need for caution. They had to gather more evidence before confronting the conspirators directly. A misstep could be fatal. "We must proceed with caution," Guillaume warned. "But we must also be prepared to face the truth, whatever it may be. The future of the Church depends on it." As darkness enveloped the Vatican, a storm gathered on the horizon, both literal and metaphorical. The Black Death raged outside the walls, and a far more insidious plague threatened to consume the Church from within. The battle for truth had begun. The weight of the Chronicle pressed down on Thomas. The egalitarian vision of the early Church, so starkly contrasting with the current hierarchy, presented an impossible dilemma. Was it his duty to expose the truth, regardless of the consequences? Agnes, ever the voice of reason, reminded him of the potential for chaos. "Truth without wisdom," she said softly, "can be as devastating as falsehood." Bishop Guillaume, his conscience torn between his faith and his duty to the Church, arrived, seeking guidance. The plague outside was claiming lives, but this secret threatened something even more profound: the soul of the Church itself. "What have we unearthed, Brother Thomas?" Guillaume asked, his voice heavy with dread. "A path to salvation or a road to ruin?" Thomas carefully laid out the evidence. The Chronicle's account of Peter's teachings, the subsequent power grab, the suppression of dissenting voices. He omitted nothing, leaving the bishop to grapple with the raw, unfiltered truth. Agnes cautioned against a hasty decision. "Consider the faithful, Bishop," she urged. "Their lives are anchored in the Church's teachings. To shatter that foundation could unleash unimaginable despair." Guillaume wrestled with his conscience. He had dedicated his life to the Church, but could he reconcile that dedication with the lies perpetuated in its name? The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within him. Thomas, practical as ever, suggested a course of action. "We must proceed with caution. If we are to reveal this truth, we must do so in a way that minimizes the chaos and maximizes the opportunity for genuine reform." Agnes advocated for involving trusted allies. "There are those within the Church who still value truth and justice. We cannot face this alone." Guillaume, seeing the wisdom in their counsel, finally agreed. "Very well," he said, his voice firm. "We will proceed with caution, seeking guidance from those who share our commitment to truth." Unbeknownst to them, far away in Florence, Niccolo Machiavelli continued his own investigations, his letters hinting at a fascination with how history could be shaped and manipulated to serve the ambitions of rulers. His path, though separate, would soon intertwine with theirs. The decision was made. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but they would face it together, bound by a shared commitment to the truth, whatever the price may be. The future of the Church and perhaps the world hung in the balance. The air in the chamber was thick with anticipation. The weight of the decision before them pressed down on everyone present. Brother Thomas knew that the next few hours would determine the future of the Church. Sister Agnes stood silently by Thomas's side, her presence a silent testament to the strength of her convictions. She had dedicated her life to the Church, but she also knew that truth was paramount, even if it meant challenging the established order. Bishop Guillaume cleared his throat, his voice resonating through the chamber. "My brothers," he began, "we stand at a crossroads. What Brother Thomas and Sister Agnes are about to reveal will challenge everything we believe to be true." The cardinals, a collection of the most powerful men in the Church, listened intently. Their faces were a mixture of skepticism, curiosity, and fear. They knew that the stakes were impossibly high. Thomas began to read, his voice steady and clear. The words of the chronicle filled the chamber, painting a picture of the early church that was far removed from the institution they knew. He spoke of Peter's vision of community and shared faith, a vision deliberately suppressed. Agnes stepped forward, elaborating on a passage from the chronicle. Her deep knowledge of early Christian history lent credence to the document's claims. She spoke of the power struggles within the early church, the ambition that had led to the suppression of Peter's true teachings. Guillaume listened intently, his expression shifting from skepticism to dawning realization. The weight of the truth settled upon him, crushing the foundations of his faith. He began to question everything he had ever believed. A heated debate erupted among the cardinals. Some argued vehemently for the suppression of the chronicle, fearing the chaos it would unleash. Others, swayed by the evidence and the righteousness of Thomas and Agnes, argued for its release, believing that the truth must prevail, however dangerous it may be. Finally, Guillaume raised his hand for silence. His face was resolute, his decision made. "We will release the chronicle," he announced, his voice ringing with newfound conviction. "The truth must be known, whatever the cost." Thomas looked towards Agnes, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. They had done what they believed was right, but the future remained uncertain. The doors of the Vatican secret archives opened, revealing a faint light. The world outside was still ravaged by plague, but a new dawn might be breaking for the Church. Rome lay shrouded in a misty morning light. The Black Death still raged, but the seeds of change had been sown. Whether they would blossom into a new era of enlightenment or wither in the face of entrenched power remained to be seen. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the world would never be the same.